Good afternoon. I'm always happy when our students will ask questions, have questions, write in questions to me. Because that is our purpose in being together, to bring forth the light of wisdom, spiritual wisdom of God. And where two or more are gathered together, where we ask questions of each other, we turn to that one mind, that one soul for our answer. And the activity of questioning is second only in importance to the activity of receptivity. But before there can be receptivity, there must be a questioning state of mind. Nobody is receptive who believes they know the answer. They're shutting out all receptivity. The moment they believe, they know the answer. Now, in spiritual wisdom, there is no one who knows the answer. You cannot go to anyone or to any book for an answer for the simple reason that no one has it. And the reason we go to each other is that we know we haven't got the answer. And so we go to God. When you ask me a question, I could answer the question out of my knowledge or out of the quotation from the Bible, but that may not be the answer at that moment. And so I would never think of answering a letter for help without going into meditation first. I would never think of receiving a student or patient in my office without going to the source before I gave them any help or any answer. Because there's nothing that I've learned in 24 years of study that is of any importance to you, except that I have found out that whatever I humanly know is not spiritual wisdom. And therefore, when you come or when you ask, I go to the source to get the answer. That is the benefit of my 24 years, that I know enough not to answer, I know enough not to treat, I know enough not to pray until I have gone to the source. That is why I meditate when we come in here. That is why I have meditated downstairs 5 or 10 minutes before I have come up. That is why I have meditated for hours during the night before I ever go to a lecture or a class. For the simple reason that if I could recite to you all the wisdom of all the books of wisdom, and if I could recite to you all the great passages of Scripture, you would have nothing more nor less than more words, more statements, more truths in the mind. But that would not be power. Now, that is well illustrated here in a question. To begin with, I had here 2 memorandums for today. The one says, the secret of the infinite way is in the understanding of the word consciousness. And it is. That's why there is an infinite way teaching. The infinite way is not a copy of any teaching, nor is it a combination of teachings. The infinite way had its basis in all the years of study and practice that led me to the realization that the secret of life is in the word consciousness. Now, after you have that, you have the foundation. The next note I had was this. It is necessary for each person to understand why words are unnecessary in prayer and communion. Do you hear that? It is necessary for each person to understand why words are unnecessary in prayer or communion. Well, now here is the illustration of that in this question that is given me today. Treating is a form of prayer. Praying for loved ones and friends is a waste of time. Is it a waste of time to treat for loved ones or friends? And you see, the answer is no, it is not a waste of time to pray for loved ones or friends, in spite of the fact that the Master said, and we teach, that it is a waste of time to pray for relatives and friends. Now then, what is the meaning of that double talk? And it is double talk. Because who prayed more for his friends and students and disciples and patients than Christ Jesus? Has anyone ever been known to pray more specifically for those of his own household? He said, I am come to those of my own household. Did anyone ever pray more for his own Hebrew people than the Master? And more especially for those who came to him by the hillsides or by the seashore? Certainly we know the answer to that. He was the greatest praying man so far as we have any written record of. And his prayers were almost exclusively for his own followers. In one place he refused to pray for someone who was not of his own household. But after she begged and pleaded quite a while, he made an exception and prayed for her. Later, he prayed for the woman at the well of Samaria, and she was astounded that a Jew would pray for a Samaritan, because it isn't done. Now, the answer to this double talk is this. Prayer is a recognition of God as the soul of man. Prayer is a recognition of God as the life and the activity and the law under this universe. So actually, there would be no such thing as a prayer, or your prayer wouldn't be prayer if it didn't include your friends and relatives and allies and associates. But the meaning of the Master's statement that they, the nations of the world, the scribes and the Pharisees, pray for their friends and it profiteth them nothing, what he was trying to convey is that they only prayed for their friends. They only wanted God's intercession for their friends and relatives, and that profiteth you nothing. Unless your prayer is all-inclusive and takes in what the world might call your enemies, the pagans of the world, the dictators of the world, the lions and tigers and sharks of the world. Unless your prayer includes them, then it profiteth you nothing just to pray that God's grace be given to some member of your household or to yourself or to your firm or to your nation. You see, the sense of separation that has caused the world's difficulties, including our individual difficulties, has been that very thing. We have set up my people as your people. And then, as if that weren't sad enough, we have set up my church and your church. If that weren't sad enough, we have set up nation against nation, people against people, church against church, religion against religion, race against race, as if God weren't the law of this entire universe, as if God were less God to a potato than to an orchid. How can we set up anything that resembles a God and then expect that its sunshine will come on your garden but not mine, or will shine in my garden but not Russia's, or the Jews, or the Protestants, or the Catholics. How can anyone set up such a God and expect that they are praying? Do you see why for 3 years now our work in every class and lecture has evolved around the two subjects: what is the nature of God and what is the nature of prayer? We cannot get past that point. We cannot get into spiritual living or spiritual wisdom without some degree of understanding of what God is. Once you understand the nature of God, you understand the nature of prayer. Now, our individual contact with God is through prayer. That is our means of contact. And the reason is the word consciousness. Everything that takes place in consciousness. So, prayer must be an activity of consciousness. Whose consciousness? There isn't any but yours and mine. There's only one consciousness. And so, within us must take place the activity of prayer. But where is prayer supposed to reach? It is supposed to reach God. But prayer takes place within us. Yes, because God takes place within us. The activity of God and the activity of prayer all takes place within our own being. Now then, there is no way to contact God except through prayer. There is no way to understand prayer except through first knowing the nature of God. Now, there is a reason for this. How would we come to any understanding of either God or prayer unless our motive were pure? How could we ever come? Think for a minute. Let's forget religion. Let's forget church. Let's forget your teaching or my teaching, or Christian Science teaching or Catholic teaching. Let's forget all that for a minute. Let's just think now about the word God. That's all, just God. If you like, let us go back in history to where there wasn't a man or woman on the face of the earth. And think of God. Think of this round globe that we call the earth, first of all. And see if it would make any difference to God which side of the round earth were up or down or sideways. See if actually heaven could be upstairs and hell downstairs. And you'll understand that in this rotation of the earth, you'd have hell upstairs and heaven downstairs at some time or other. Now, as you observe this universe, notice that the waters are all in their beds. The mountains are here, the trees are here, the fish are in the sea, the birds are in the air. Around this universe there are universes of stars and planets. Now just think of what the nature of God must be, that it is all-inclusive and that it circles this entire globe and all these other universes and maintains them in a rhythm. Maintains them in a rhythm so that the waters are always flowing here and there, and the skies are always overhead, the birds are here and the fish are here, and everything is in its rightful place. And tell me now, does it make any difference to God what religion the fish are, or which church they go into, or what river they are flowing up or down? No. Now man comes on earth, and woman. Can it make any difference whether the Garden of Eden is in the east or the Middle East or in the west? Can it make any difference to God whether it's male or female? Can it make any difference to God whether it's a 2-footed man or 4-footed man? No. Now you commence to see what the nature of God is. God is love. God is life, and God is law, and God is action. And you can see God flowing in this universe. You can see God flowing all through the stars and the planets. You can see and feel God. You can feel God rustling through the trees. You can feel God in the breeze. You can feel God in a sunset and a sunrise. And you'll know right well that God has no religion. And you know God has no race. And God has no clime. God just is an eternal state of harmonious being, a law governing this universe, knowing no such thing as differences. Now, as you commence to perceive God in all growing things, you'll know the livingness of God, the life of God, the soul of God. As you begin to perceive the beauty of this universe, you'll see how God shines itself forth in infinite form and variety, and you'll know then that God is no respecter of persons. God has no awareness of persons. God merely flows into expression. The invisible flows into visibility. The Word becomes flesh. Remember that. God flows from the invisible to the visible. Why, you can see that in your own experience of parenthood, how in 1 second there is nothing, and in the next second somewhere in your body there's a seed, and a few months later it's a child. The invisible first becomes visible as a tiny seed, and the tiny seed becomes visible as a baby, and ultimately that becomes visible as our adulthood. But it was the invisible flowing into visibility. Even before there was a visible seed, there had to be an invisible action called love. Love is behind it all, whether it is the creation of human children or birds or fish. It's love. Love is the animating principle. Now, does a bird know anything about love? Not any more than a human being does, and a human being knows nothing. God alone is love, and it is the love of God that causes mating, not love of man or woman, not the love of a male bird and a female bird, not the love of a male fish and a female fish. There is no such thing as that kind of love. All love is of God. Now, the only reason that humans have gummed up the situation is that they have taken a love unto themselves and made a cheap passion of it, a pastime of it, a pleasure. And out of that has come the fruits of evil humanhood. Instead of being passive and not going out and trying to mate, but waiting for the instinct to come through one and draw one's own. You'd be surprised that after you've seen the spiritual vision, you'll know there's a wonderful truth. There's only one man made for one woman. In all the world, there's no such thing as 2 women for one man or 2 men for one woman. There is no such thing in all the world. The minute you see back into the spiritual picture, you'll know that from beginning of time, there has been one man and one woman created in the image and likeness of God in their own being. If the world had enough ability not to want to marry for a home or for an income or for security or for a family, but would give up all desire to marry until that thing came through, each would find that one. And very much like that happens in the bird world and in some parts of the animal world, where there is no such thing as promiscuity. Now, the reason for it is this. It has nothing to do with you or me. It has nothing to do with men or women. Because of this you may be assured, and this has come to me in a revelation, not through thinking, not through reasoning, nor through teaching. And it's all in that booklet, Love and Gratitude. It is an impossibility for you or me to love. Love is God. God is love. And God is the love that permeates our being, just as you watch dogs playing together, cats playing together, birds singing together, and you say, why, they don't have the capacity for that. They don't know anything about singing. They don't know anything about playing. They don't know anything about loving. Certainly not. It's the force of God itself operating in them, just as it operates to form coral in the sea, just as it operates to form the caves in the sea. Love, God is doing all that. Now, the moment you catch that glimpse of God, you commence to know how to pray. Why? Because now you can see that you can't get that God to do anything for you, for your friends, or for your relatives. And you can't get that God to stop doing things for your enemies. That kind of a God cannot be influenced by man. Now, the minute you realize that you can't influence God, your idea of prayer changes. Now you don't ask for things. Now you don't demand things. Now you don't say, turn to God as if you're expecting things. Now you have a whole new concept of God. You see God now as the life flowing through birds, through plants, through trees, through the ocean. You can go and sit by the ocean and just watch the vibrations, the atmosphere of God as it permeates the waters. Now then, you can do that up on a mountaintop too. You can just feel the sacredness of that experience. Well, who now would pray to that God to do something for their friends or relatives? Do you see that? That's the meaning of the passage in Scripture. It profiteth you nothing to turn to that God and ask it to do things for your friends and relatives. But the minute you understand that God, you can see that all mankind, human, animal, vegetable, mineral, is included in that Godhead and is the fruitage of the flow of God. Now you are praying for your friends as well as your enemies. Now you can pray for those of your own household, because now you can sit back and ponder this idea of God, realize, and what do you find? Why, you just see life flowing through a coconut tree and appearing as coconut. And you see some more life flowing through the papaya tree and appearing as papaya. And then you see it through your rose garden, and it appears as roses. And you look out into the ocean, and you're not only aware of the activity of the sea, but you're also aware of the billions of fish down there and the food that has been provided for those fish. Just think of it. At the bottom of the sea, there are not only fish. God has not only planted fish there, but planted food for the fish, and nesting places for the fish, or resting places for the fish. And so in the air, God has not only given us air, but birds to fly through the air. And as you travel this world, especially as you travel by automobile, and come upon places such as I have seen, well, outside of Victoria, B.C. is one, a great big bird sanctuary where the birds all roost coming down from Alaska. That's a stopping place for the birds coming down from the north, right outside of Victoria, B.C., and they are there in, I was going to say millions, but that may be exaggeration, thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of birds in this sanctuary, all knowing that they should go to Victoria, B.C. Well, Victoria is a very beautiful city, and probably they want to see it too. But the point is that God has provided sanctuaries all over. You say, no man provided them. Don't you ever believe it? It is the love of God in man that makes him provide a sanctuary for a bird. Man, when he provides a sanctuary for a bird, is praying. He's fulfilling God's mission to those birds. He's an instrument used by God to provide them with their resting places. Now, once you begin to see that love has nothing to do with mankind, that man is just an instrument through which God's love operates, you also eventually come to see that that's true of law. And you begin to see that there is no such thing as human law or material law. These are counterfeits which we have invented because we have lost our contact with our source. But when you get to this stage of your spiritual path, you'll begin to see why Scripture has called God not only a law, but the lawgiver. But if God is infinite, then God as lawgiver is infinite, then there can't be any law unless it's the law of God. You can't have the infinity of God as law and then some other law but God, can you? Because you can't have an infinite God and a law. So the only law there is in this world has nothing to do with you or me or nature or matter. The only laws there are in this world is God flowing forth as law, just as God flows forth as love, just as God expresses itself and flows forth as life. So God expresses itself and flows forth as law. Now you'll find in the Infinite Way writings that one of the first major principles that ever was given to me that brought me out into this work was the word as. Years and years ago, I saw that it was not true that there is God and man, or God and a universe, because that is two-ness, that is duality, that is separation. The word should have been as. God appeared as Adam and Eve. God appeared as the law of love. God appeared as the law of creation. There is no God and a law of creation. God is the law of creation. God is the life of man. And so that is why after years of teaching and writing on the subject of God as, all of a sudden it dawned that God is. And not only that God is, but that creation is. And so, when is it, Don? About 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, that we were sitting at the breakfast table, and all of a sudden the word is came through. Is. And we knew what prayer was. You can't pray for anything to happen. This universe already is. And God is the substance of this universe. God is the law of this universe. Now, if you want to pray, pray. Acknowledge. Acknowledge him in all thy ways. Lean not unto thine own understanding. Acknowledge him in all thy ways, and he will give thee rest. That is prayer. You see that? Acknowledge God, and he will give thee rest. Now you know how to pray in order to get rest. Acknowledge him. If you want health, do the same thing. Acknowledge him in all thy ways. If you want law, if you want life, if you want love, if you want supply, acknowledge him, and he will give it to you. Now, the moment that you acknowledge God as infinite, you can no longer turn to God for something, for somebody. Your whole prayer becomes an acknowledgement of him in all thy ways. Acknowledge God as the life of your being, and pretty soon you will begin to realize immortality. Acknowledge God as the love of your being, and pretty soon you will be experiencing love from all directions. Acknowledge God not as something that can send you supply. Acknowledge God as your supply, and pretty soon, in feeling God, you'll be feeling supply all around you. Because God is supply. God does not send supply. Now, God does not give supply. God is supply. And that brings you to another one of the great principles that is in this work, and that is that you cannot demonstrate anything in life. You cannot go to God for a demonstration of supply, or for a demonstration of home, or for a demonstration of love, or for a demonstration of transportation, or for a demonstration of automobiles. That is only the human counterfeit of spiritual activity, and is only for those who have not realized God. They can use it as a substitute, just like mental power. There are people who can hypnotize. All they are doing is exercising a mental power which actually is a human counterfeit of a divine activity, oneness. But at this stage of our development, and this is the stage that all metaphysics is going through now, there is a change going on in the entire metaphysical world, and it won't be many years before you'll see all their books changed, as their magazines are changing now, to bring out this point that no longer can you demonstrate an automobile or $20 gold pieces or transportation or a home or companionship. You can't demonstrate those. There is now this realization: you can only demonstrate God. That's all. You can only demonstrate a realization of God, the feel of God's presence, the awareness of God's presence. And of course that brings up a subject that I hope will be enlarged upon in class, and that is this: never approach this work unless you come with clean hands. Be very pure when you come to this work, because if you have a selfish motive or a selfish desire, it will wang back. That is why so much of this demonstrating dollars wangs back. Even if you get them, they turn around and become a curse. You can demonstrate companionship and get an awful bad wallop from it. But if you demonstrate God alone, you are coming pure. You're bringing your purity of consciousness, and out of it will come purity. Then you'll find that you will not suffer reactions. You won't say, I got my companionship and look what it did to me. Or I got the money and now what am I going to do with it? Or I got a home and now it's a lemon. No. When you come to this work, you must come with spiritual integrity. I'm not talking now about human honesty or human goodness. The spiritual integrity that says, all I want is to feel God, to realize God. All I want is to know God. To know Him aright is life eternal. Well, who wants to die? Who wants to be poor? Who wants to be out of line with the harmony of God? And there's only one way to be in accord with the harmony of God. To know Him aright is life eternal. Why? To know God, all things are added unto us. Actually, they're not added, they're included. Once you feel the presence of God, you soon find that no longer do you have to take thought for what you shall eat or what you shall drink or wherewithal you shall be clothed or how you'll be housed. The things flow automatically. But therein is the secret. You have to come to this with a pure heart. You have to come without a selfish motive. You have to come, and that is your praying for, not praying for friends and relatives alone, because that would be impure, that would be selfish. But when you come and say, all I want is to realize that God is the soul of this universe, you have included your friends and your relatives. And if you want, you can take them specifically into your consciousness. Only be sure that at the same time you are realizing that anybody anywhere in the globe that is at all receptive is likewise receiving the benefit of this prayer. That is why, very often, what the world calls sinners have some strange experiences. Sometimes a person may be under some claim of what the world calls sin or disease, and in a moment they experience something that they know nothing about, but all of a sudden their false desires are gone or their disease is gone. And they wonder what happened. And the answer is that somewhere someone prayed. But they prayed truly. They prayed a universal prayer of God's allness. And anyone who somewhere in the background, no matter what they may have been doing out here in this world, somewhere in the background they were saying, oh, isn't there a God? Can I reach God? Isn't there something that would free me from this sin or disease, whatever it may be, imprisonment or other enslavement of the senses? And inwardly, all unseen to the world, they were saying, oh, isn't there something? Isn't there a power that could rescue me? Isn't there something? And out here was somebody realizing the presence of God as filling all space, as being the activity of the consciousness of all individual beings, and in the second that that person reached out, they had their healing too, and probably afterward turned to some form of religious experience or God, not knowing what had driven them. Prayer did it. That is why someday everyone must learn that there is no death. And when you learn that there is no death, you will learn one of the greatest secrets ever given to man, that behind this world of appearances, Buddha and Lao Tse and Jesus and John and Paul and 1,000 others, 1,000,000 others, are praying for us, are knowing the truth for us. They have never died, and they never will die, and no person who ever touches the divine consciousness will ever die. And if they were a praying man while they were visible, they're all the more a praying man in the invisible. Never, never doubt that these people are still praying in the visible and in the invisible. And from the standpoint of the invisible, they reach us and touch us, and we don't know why. Who is it? Tell me, who is it that knows why a poor little housekeeper up in New England becomes a religious leader in the world? Will you tell me how it is that a traveling salesman, businessman, becomes a worker in a religious field? Who does that? What happens? Do you mean that there isn't some influence that is touching our consciousness and changing us from housewives or businessmen to people in the spiritual field of work? Why, you must know that it's only through prayer. And one of these days you'll behold a vision. You look out here and you'll see people's bodies, and you'll say, if I wanted anything, I wouldn't want it from them. And then you'll see that right next to them is the soul of them, the spirit of them, that which Jesus said was the kingdom of God which is within you. And it is within you. It's not locked up in your body. It's within your consciousness. And those who are attuned to the spirit can see and feel your soul. At least the souls of those who aren't too buried, who haven't got their souls too buried in carnality, materiality, as there are some in this world that just cannot be reached. But believe me that there are those of spiritual vision who, when they look out here, are not aware so much of your form as they are aware of something about you that the world calls atmosphere, aura, vibration. There are 1,000,000 words for it. But I can tell you that it's your soul. And I can tell you something further than that. It's God. It's the Godhood of you. It's the Christhood of you. And everyone has it. But we have to train ourselves to become aware of it. Why? Because as humans, we are taught to look at each other to see whether we're honest or dishonest, or beautiful or handsome, or not so. And in this work, it is a training away from that, so that you don't look at a person and try to psychologize them and see whether they're good people or bad, or whether they're influenced by this or that. You look through all of their humanhood, and eventually you get to the place where you see this soul. Many people speak of it as seeing an aura physically. I mean, they actually see a light or something. I don't, and I never have. I don't see auras in that sense. I merely sense and feel the soul of a person, and there's nothing physical because I don't see it, hear it, taste it, touch it, or smell it, but I have an awareness of it. I have a feeling for it, and when I treat or pray, I become one with it. I become one with that soul of the individual, and then the harmony that's in their soul begins to come out. That's where Browning's poem comes in. Truth is within ourselves. We must make a way for its imprisoned splendor to escape. And you see, the moment we touch the consciousness or soul of an individual, it's as if it were that big, and then it begins to expand, and out of it come the issues of life, of good life, harmonious life, loving life. And what is it? Here's the secret. It's an outlet for God. And that's what our individual soul is. It's an outlet for God to flow through. Then it isn't our love that grows, or our life that grows, or our supply. It's God flowing through. Now that's the secret of the infinite way work. God is individual consciousness, and your consciousness individually contains eternality, immortality, infinite supply, divine love, infinite wisdom. Now then, let us find a way to open it so that it flows out, and then not get egotistical and think, oh, what wonderful things I am. No. No, let's realize then, and that's the danger point. The danger point on the religious path is that somehow people like the idea of spiritual power, and of liking the idea that they can have spiritual power. That's where the temptation of the master comes in. God forbid that any one of us should ever have spiritual power. God forbid that any man or woman on earth should ever get to believing that anyone on earth, including Jesus Christ, had spiritual power. Nobody has spiritual power but God. Why callest thou me good? There is but one good, the Father in heaven, and be satisfied. That's why Jesus wouldn't turn stones into bread or jump down off of a mountain. And I'm sure that if he were here today, he wouldn't eat a lot of foods that are put around on our table before it, for the same reason. He's not going to tempt himself with that nonsense and try to overcome it. Now, let us understand this very clearly. The moment you understand God as the very soul of an individual, you know how to pray for that individual. Because you can turn right to that individual and touch their soul. And when you touch that soul, you bring out a love. It isn't a personal love, it's the love of God. Sometimes on the spiritual path or the metaphysical path, you will find this, that couples have gotten in trouble that met as practitioner and patient, or teacher and student, for the simple reason that the love that developed, one or the other of them or both began to take as personal love. And when it did, that broke the whole picture, you see, because there is a wonderful feeling between every teacher and a student, if he's a real teacher. There's a wonderful feeling. But the teacher, first of all, must realize that that feeling that's engendered is love. But it's the love of God, not the love of person, not the love of money and not the love of body. It's the love of God. Then the student is lifted up to that, and then, lo and behold, the most wonderful relationships take place on this earth. And there are no more wonderful relationships than those that take place between the teacher who has had spiritual illumination and their student body. It's only where some do not rise high enough to perceive the nature of that we have these things that have happened in the field to the detriment of metaphysics. Now, let us be very clear upon this and study it well in that booklet, Love and Gratitude. Catch this idea that God is the only love. And then don't credit people with being loving. Because the minute you stop that, you'll stop crediting other people with being hateful, vicious. You see, You cannot condemn anyone in this world. But on the other hand, neither can you praise them. You've got to understand that God is the only soul, the only being, and every good quality that an individual has is God flowing through them. Every bad quality they have represents their ignorance of God. That's why you can forgive them 70 times 7, because any day they're apt to wake up and find this God love, and then, though they were scarlet, they're white as snow. The sins of the world have nothing to do with an individual the moment they've awakened to the fact of God. And so you see, to understand God in this universal, spiritual, omnipresent sense is also to awaken us to the nature of prayer. Then when we've come to the nature of prayer, we can pray for our own family, we can pray for our own patients, we can pray for our own citizens, because all we're doing them is taking them into that universal love of God, and we've already taken our enemies there. You remember I told you that the boys going to war, all I asked of them was to say the first prayer in the morning when they awakened for the enemy. After that, I didn't care how much they prayed for their allies and their friends and the members of their own company. Do all that praying they want. But it would have been no good if their first prayer had not been for the enemy. Because that's the toughest part of prayer, is to see that God's grace falls on the just and the unjust. God's love is for the saint and the sinner. That is why theologians have a very difficult time with metaphysics. They see it as unjust that the sinner should get just as much blessing as the saint. They see it as unjust that the person who hasn't lived their life toward what they think is God should get the same blessing. But you see, that's all wrong. God is like the sunshine. God doesn't intrude into our consciousness. We have to open ourselves to God, just as we have to go out on the street to get the sunshine or lift up the shades. It's an act of consciousness to find God, but God is available to saint or sinner. God is available to rich or poor, white or black. None of this has anything to do with God. It is Adam who gave these names to everything. It isn't God who gave those names. Even Scripture tells you that. Adam gave these names, not God. God has included us all in one family. Isn't it in the New Testament, all of one blood? All of one blood, all of one? Why, sure, there's only one blood in man. That's God's blood. That's the only blood there is. That's the only life there is in man, is the life of God. And as we, in this modern day, come into that realization, we will break down all of these prejudices that have been built up by churches and flags. Churches have built this division on the religious angle, and flags have built it on the national issue. I remember many years ago, there was a newspaper in New York City, and its banner was, "My country, right or wrong, my country." Isn't that a terrible thing? How's it ever going to get right if you're going to worship it in its wrongness? Well, we wouldn't even do that in our families today. Not my family, right or wrong. Certainly not. We want our families to be right. We want our teaching to be right. We want our nation to be right. But if our nation isn't right, it isn't up to us to praise it for being wrong, but to try to change it and bring about the right. But as long as we have flags that we're going to worship as against somebody else's flag, as long as we're going to have churches that we worship ahead of somebody else, it's right to have flags, and it's right to have churches, but let's love all of them. Let's not set one up against another, or one as being right and another one as being wrong, another one being in God's grace and another one being out of God's grace. There are so many facets to truth that there is room in this world for Christian Science and for unity and for new thought and for infinite way and for 1,000 more such teachings. And none will infringe on the other. Each will present some facet of truth as it sees it. They don't have to compete. They can unite and still each retain their own individuality like the states of the United States. 48 states, but all united in one, yet each one, pre-New Deal day, each one maintaining its own individual identity and integrity, and yet united in one good common cause. Well, that will come again. That will come again. It is so near to a spiritual relationship that no form of government is ever going to break it down. That will come back again, and you will again see that we'll have 48 or 9 or 50 states, each one an individual identity, each one an individuality, each one its own being, and yet all united in one. But we'll go further than that, and someday we'll see the United States of the world, or United Nations of the world. But that will come in the same way, not through a United Nations, but when individuals first and groups next and nations next begin to see that only insofar as we are willing to consider each other's problems in the light of one as being important to each other, only in that light can this come, that we can each be individuals and yet unite in one. Well, that's the way it goes. 60 minutes, fly around the clock. But that too is a lesson. You see, there is no such thing as 60 minutes. There is no such thing as an hour. There is only the minute in which we are living. Just think, here I come in, and one of our good friends gives me a question. And by filling up 1 minute with that question, 60 minutes have gone around. That's the way it is with life. All we are called on to do, and that's one of the principles in the Infinite Way too, all we are ever called on to do, yes, the principle is this: to him that hath shall be given. That's the principle. As long as we acknowledge that we have this minute, that's all that's necessary. Because as we continue in this minute, we wake up and find out it's 60 minutes. Thank you. Thank you.